Hello, I'm Christy Welch, Direct Marketing Specialist with the Ohio State University South Centers, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our virtual 2021 Agritourism Ready Conference. We are sorry we can't be all together on a farm this year as we've done in the past, but we do think that we have some great information from a variety of presenters for you. So I hope you enjoy watching the presentations. Be sure to submit any questions that you have about the presentations to the email address you received your registration confirmation from. And then we hope you can join us live on March the 18th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. online. And our presenters will be with us and able to answer your questions live at that time. And I wanted to thank the Wright and Moore Law Company, as well as Ohio Farm Bureau Federation of Ross, Pickaway, Hocking, and Fairfield counties for collaborating with us again this year to bring you some great information about Agritourism Ready here in Ohio. And again, we look forward to seeing you March 18th at 6:30 p.m.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Ohio Agritourism Ready Conference this year. Sorry that we are virtual and can't be together to discuss the many things that you're doing and issues that you're dealing with, but hopefully we'll have a little bit of time later this month when we all get together for our social hour. Look forward to seeing you there. I am Peggy Hall, and I'm the director of OSU Extension's Agricultural and Resource Law Program. And I may have met some of you in the past dealing with legal issues that our agritourism operations in Ohio encounter. And that's what I try to do, is provide you information and resources on those legal issues. So for our conference this year, I decided to take on this topic of the farm stay. Seems to be a growing trend across the country to offer farm stay, those overnight accommodations on farms. And so I want to highlight some of the legal issues for you to consider if you're thinking about adding this to your range of activities that you offer on your operation. So first, though, what a farm stay is, what I mean by that, there is actually, if you may not know this, a U.S. Farm Stay Association that does try to bring people together who are doing these kinds of activities and provide resources and assistance to them. So if you're thinking about this, I would encourage you to check out their website, U.S. Farm Stay Association. They define a farm stay as an experience of staying overnight out in the country on a farm, in a farm setting, and experiencing that lifestyle of living, staying in that place. And so the hosts of that farm stay put a bit of a personal face and story to that experience. Now, that's a pretty, I think, narrow definition, where they're really engaging that client, that guest, that customer in, that personal story of the farm. There are other definitions that are more broad, and you see the second one there, generally, that a farm stay is just any type of accommodation on a working farm. So it's a working farm, and that's why the guests want to stay there, because they are on a farm. They may or may not engage in what's going on in that farm, but they still are drawn to that area because they're on a working farm. And actually, if you look around the country, as I have, at the different kinds of farm stays that are offered, and also just looking beyond the US to Europe, where farm stays are much, much more common and popular than they are here in the United States. But we are gaining that sector in the US. But if you look at the different types of farm stays, there are three different ways of providing this kind of accommodation. The first one is highly engaged, that you see here on the left. And in that model, the guests are staying on the farm or really close on the farmstead, engaging in chores, feeding the chickens, milking the cows, collecting produce from the garden, whatever it might be. They're engaging in that lifestyle that the farm offers. And often they are staying right near the farmstead, if not in the farmhouse itself, and even having meals with the farm family and perhaps helping with those meals. They want to be a part of that entire experience. The second model is let's take a little step back and not be quite so engaged in the farm activities, but we want to be around the farm. But we want to be there and do some activities. What are those activities? In that model, you see a lot of educational classes. So maybe they want to learn how to have a sustainable garden or how to can tomatoes, whatever it might be. Or they want to be pampered a little bit with, a spa treatment featuring products made at the farm. Those kinds of experiences that aren't full-fledged in the chores, feeding the chickens kinds of experiences. And they're usually a little bit more removed from the farmstead and maybe not staying right in the house, maybe separate accommodations, or if they're in their house, they're not engaging and helping with meals and all that. They're a little more focused on what they want to do for their experience. In the third model, it's a more recreational experience that the customers are after. So they want to be there on the farm because they want to engage in those outdoor amenities that farms offer. So hiking or horseback riding or snowmobiling or hunting, they're there for those kinds of amenities and not because they want to be doing chores and engaging in the farm life itself. So really looking at capitalizing on the amenities in that model. So they tend to be more removed, even staying in a little cabin off to themselves, something like that. And meals may not just be part of what they do to interact with the farm family at all. They provide their own meals or eat elsewhere. So those are the three general models that I see. And regardless of which model you use, we do need to think about the legal issues that would come with offering any of these variations on your farm. So let's tackle the first issue, and that is we have to ask the important question of, is this agritourism according to Ohio's agritourism law? I've talked about this before, the kind of tedious definition, the hoops we have to jump through to ensure that what we're doing is agritourism according to that law that is in the Ohio Revised Code in a couple of different places. If it is agritourism, then your activity is largely exempt from zoning prohibitions. Your township or county is not going to be able to prohibit you from doing it because it's agritourism. They can have a few zoning requirements, but largely exempt from zoning prohibitions. You also would have the liability protection that is offered in the agritourism law that says you are immune from liability if those guests are harmed while engaging in the inherent risks of agritourism activities. So those are two benefits of qualifying as agritourism. And I've written law bulletins. You can find those on my website if you want to go into more detail. I know I've talked to many of you about this before, and you're probably tired of hearing about it, but it is an important first question. Is it agritourism? If it's not, then you're going to have to look at your zoning, see, do they allow short-term rentals or bed and breakfast? What are their provisions here for where I am in regards to this land use activity? Can I do it? And if so, what do I need to do in order to do it legally and in accordance with my local zoning? And then you're going to lose that statutory liability protection that the agritourism law provides as well if you don't qualify as agritourism. So let's just run through that definition pretty quickly. Agritourism is an agriculturally related activity that's either educational, entertainment, historical, cultural, or recreational. And you can see the language there. We're including U-pick operations and farm markets. But the important part is it has to be conducted on a farm. And it's a farm that allows members of the public to come on and enjoy or engage in those activities. So a farm is also that second important definition, and that would be land that is basically a working farm. It's land that's engaged in commercial agricultural production and is either 10 acres in size as a minimum or has an average gross annual income of $2,500 from agricultural production. And that's an important definition too. Agricultural production means all of these things that you see here. It's commercial production. So the definition goes on from aquaculture to, growing ornamental trees and shrubs, flowers, timber for non-commercial purpose if it's attached to the land, engaging in animal husbandry, growing any kinds of crops, whether those are field crops or fruits or vegetables. That's considered agricultural production, and you're doing it for a commercial purpose. You're doing it in order to trade, engage in commerce. So it can't be just for your own consumption. It needs to be a commercial purpose attached to that agricultural production activity that you're doing. And it needs to either be an average of $2,500 of gross annual income from that activity, or on a parcel over 10 acres in size that is engaged in agricultural production. If you can meet those two, and then you're offering this type of activity on that land, this agriculturally related activity, whether it's cultural or educational or recreational, then you meet the definition of agritourism and you have the benefits that that law provides. But it's a little tedious sometimes to get through, and sometimes our local officials may not think that you do meet that definition, and so you'll have to prove that you do. So that's step one. Are you agritourism or not? And that will answer some questions for you. A second legal issue I want to talk about that's very related is code compliance. There are codes that are going to come up. Now, even if your local zoning can't prohibit you because you meet the definition of agritourism, there could be other codes that will apply to your situation. If you have, if you meet certain specifications, then you can be subject to a number of different code provisions. Now, it seems to me that an important number to keep in mind is 5. So if you are going to offer more than 5 rooms in your farm stay accommodations, you kind of cross a barrier and you're going to be subject to more code compliance. So keep that in mind. If you want to just start out with 1 or 2 rooms in your farmhouse, for instance, a lot less there to worry about because you're in a building, a residence that's already met code, is up to code, has been built properly. In those situations, there's going to be less for you to comply with. If you go over 5, however, and now you're getting a bigger structure, more people, there's more compliance to go over 5. So I've listed here a couple things to think about. You may need a hotel license that requires fire code compliance. If you offer more than 5 rooms, you'll have to get that hotel license. You may have drinking water and septic system requirements. Now that's going to depend largely on where those rooms are, what system it's on. In any situation, you'll need to have your well tested, but there could be additional requirements depending upon what you're doing, where your accommodations are, and what system you're putting them on. And then another thing to think about would be the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that, again, requires certain modifications or provisions for disability access if you are a place of lodging that offers more than 5 rooms. Or let's back that up. You're exempt as a place of lodging if you have no more than 5 rooms and those rooms are in the place where you reside, so in your home. If you have more than 5 rooms in your home or your rooms are not within your home, then you have American with Disabilities Act requirements as well. So quite a few codes and provisions that we need to work through, and you might want to plan the size and offering accordingly to minimize those requirements that come from offering more lodging in different places. The third thing to think about is whether you would need a food and beverage license. So if you do want to feed your guests, you want to give them breakfast, or maybe you include them in the evening meal, what kind of license do you need to do? What are you classified as according to your local health department and Ohio law? And then what provisions have to be met in order to offer and obtain that kind of license? Well, the food service operation license is the most likely license that you'll encounter in this situation. But note there that it's not required if it's in a private home operated as a bed and breakfast. There's that bed and breakfast language. Your guests are staying there and you're preparing and offering the foods to your guests. As long as you live in the home, so it's owner occupied, you do not have more than 6, we've changed from 5 to 6 here, more than 6 bedrooms, and you're only offering breakfast. And the final thing, you never have more than 16 guests. So we go 6, 16. I don't know why it couldn't be 5, 15 to stay with the 5s and the other provisions, but I guess we're going with pairs here. So no more than 6 bedrooms and 16 guests, breakfast only in the home where you live, no license required. If you don't meet that, then you're going to need a food service operation if you want to prepare meals for your guests as part of that experience. So consider that as well. And then there's taxes. We all love to hear about taxes, and there's a lot to think about with this because you will have to collect Ohio sales tax in certain situations. Now, there is an exemption from collecting Ohio sales tax on the lodging itself if you have less than 5 rooms. If you have 5 or more, I see I repeated my or more there. If you have 5 or more rooms, then you have to collect sales tax on the lodging. But regardless of how many rooms you have, if you're serving food, you have to collect sales tax on food consumed there at the site, even if you're exempt from the lodging sales tax. And what the Ohio Department of Taxation expects you to do is kind of separate those out. How much are you charging for the lodging and how much are you charging for the food? And charge sales tax on the portion that is attributed to the food. If you don't separate them out, then you have to pay it on the entire amount that they're paying for the experience. So that's the first thing, the state sales tax. But then be aware that there can be local taxes as well that are called lodging taxes or bed taxes or visitor taxes, something like that, that you may need to charge. And so you need to look into your local situation to see how that functions. And finally, you have to report the income itself in a different place. It's not considered farm income, even though it is on the farm. It is a separate type of income for purposes of your federal income taxes, state and federal income taxes. So it doesn't go on your Schedule F income. It's going to go on a different schedule, a C or a D, depending upon the kind of accommodation. So these are important conversations to have with your accountant to make sure you understand are collecting and recording and paying taxes that are appropriate for the type of accommodations that you offer. Number 5 is insurance and liability. And we kind of started there with the agritourism law that you could have some liability protection for those harms that they suffer while engaged in something that is inherently risky as part of that activity that they've basically signed up for. So they're there to milk the cows and they get kicked by a cow. That's an inherent risk of that agritourism activity. And so you would have immunity from that type of situation if you follow the provisions of that agritourism law. So you have your sign posted and you've taken those steps to follow the law. And again, you can find that information in my law bulletin. So that's the first thing. You could have some protection, but be aware that they could be engaging in other things and harmed by other things that maybe don't fall into that inherent risk of agritourism. And food is something that we worry a lot about. Would that be kicked out? Would your insurance provider, or in a liability situation, would they argue that out of that's not really agritourism risk? Those kinds of things we need to be aware of and watch out for them and take steps to reduce those liabilities for harms from those non-agritourism activities. And we would want to do that anyway. We wouldn't want our customers to be harmed while on the property. But it's good to check this out with your insurer. So go over what you want to do, see what your policy allows, see what additional coverage you might have to gain, and have that all be part of your kind of cost benefit analysis when deciding whether to offer a farm stay experience on your operation. Really important to take that liability risk under consideration. So with that, I've planted a few things for you to think about if you're headed in this direction. If you are thinking about offering a farm stay, have already had some experiences, have started down that road, or you're already doing it, and you have some legal issues that you would like to share, please do contact me at aglaw@osu.edu. You see my email right here. I'd like to hear what kinds of experiences you've had. We don't have a lot of farm stay opportunities in Ohio. I expect this to grow, and I think we can all help one another as we work through this and share what our local governments are saying about these farm stay activities. You can find my resources here on the Farm Office website, farmoffice.osu.edu. You can find a number of resources on agritourism law here on that shelf of the Ag Law Library, which you get to from this tab up here. And we have a number of publications. You'll find there this publication that I wrote for the National Agricultural Law Center on 10 legal issues for farm stay operators. And we covered a lot of those, even though my list, I kind of condensed and packed it down into 5. But that's taking a more national look at farm stays and highlighting where states can differ, but still focusing in on these issues that I've raised for you today. So you can find that here on farmoffice.osu.edu on our agritourism page. So I'd love to hear from you. I look forward to questions, concerns, other ideas that you have as we start down the path of offering more farm stay opportunities in Ohio. Thanks, everyone, and take care.